Welcome to the Social Landlord podcast, where smart investing meets peace of mind. In each episode, we're going to take a deep dive into the secrets of successful property management. So stay tuned as we reveal what it takes to become a socially responsible and successful landlord. Paul, welcome back for part 2. So, as we said, I want to get into the nitty gritty now. I want to hear a little bit of
the doldrums, yeah.
The numbers too precise.
These numbers that when you phone up your typical mortgage advisor and they're trying to beat around the bush and hide it because it's an awful figure, I want you to divulge. So, where are we at the moment? What do you see in the next 6 months?
I've got to always caveat that I'm not Mystic Meg. I'm not.
This is not financial advice.
I'm not Paul Daniels. I haven't got like mortgage magic or anything like that. But this is purely from my opinion. The rates are slowly coming down in line with what's happening in the external environment.
Mm-hmm.
So with the interest rate that has slightly come down at the moment. So sorry, not interest rate, base rate that has come down. The lenders and many lenders have reacted to that with tracker deals that have reduced.
Mm-hmm.
So what tracker deals are is that they track the external environment and they make their opinions on the interest rate accordingly.
That's a double-edged sword, though.
It is. So it can go up or it can come down. So those are the tracker rates. So with the fixed rates, from what I can see, and as a person with a mortgage sourcing system, I'm probably best placed to know exactly what is going on within the actual rates and access to best part of 90-odd lenders. Many lenders have responded to that, but not to the levels of what we were seeing pre-COVID, that many would like to see, so to speak. So the residential space has come down, I would say, 0.2 to 0.3%, which is a lot more positive than it was. And it's a little bit more interesting on the buy-to-let space, so buying for the purpose of renting out that property. There are some lenders that have gone below the 3.5% mark. However, they do caveat that with lender arrangement fees. So you really have to
make up the 4 years worth of mortgage fees in an upfront fee.
That is, that can be argued.
Yeah,
I would say so.
It's all right giving with one hand and taking away with the other, isn't it? It doesn't.
It depends the type of landlord that you are or how you want to purchase that particular property. So I would say there is a positive outlook. The market is still buoyant. There are still properties to be bought. There's still people that are selling, not to the type of levels, in my opinion, that we saw a couple of years ago. But I'm busy, which is always good. It is always good.
What's your opinion on prices at the moment? Because obviously I'm using yourself for myself.
Mm-hmm.
But where deposit ready, where we want to be, just isn't anything there that I want to give my money for.
True.
And anything that is on there is, prefab ex-council houses that I wouldn't value any more than 100 grand, and they're asking for offers over 160, 150. It's just... But at a point, it has to become a market value. It's been 3 years now these prices have been...
What I would say is when demand outstrips supply, this is exactly what's going to happen. So the prices are going to say typically quite stagnant at the moment, unless we get into a situation by where there is a squeeze on mortgage lending, one, or
like a year ago.
this country suddenly starts building 500,000 homes a year.
Keir Starmer's promises building loads of houses.
Well, we'll see. I mean, there's been a lot of house building promises over the last 25 years.
Chuck them up in 25 minutes a piece, and all the new builds. And
what you don't want is these houses or flats to be built with a whole host of problems.
Yeah.
Because that again impacts on the lending of those properties. And I would say another aspect is to make sure that we're building the right type of homes. I think we have an abundance of flats at the moment, and there is not an abundance of family homes that would cater to that dynamic. So it's the right type of homes to actually be built as well.
I think when obviously COVID happened, everyone went mad. They wanted to buy anything, flats, bungalows, houses, because they just wanted to be out of the rented space. And obviously that sent the prices through the roof. They stayed there for a little while, and then, like you said, there was a bit of a mortgage squeeze. Interest rates went mad. You were negotiating 25-30% off the asking price, and this is on the market properties. But that just seems to have rebounded, like fairly close, and not quite COVID highs, but fairly similar to where it was. The ask prices now are just back where they are. At what point after, 3 years, 4 years?
COVID, 4 years.
4 years? At what point do you start deeming it as a market value? Because a bank won't lend on something that's worth 100 if it's being asked for 150. You know that yourself.
True.
You'd need to bridge an extra 50 grand. When does it become a market value? How long do they hold out before they start?
How do they accept it as market value?
Yeah, how long
Yeah.
until they accept it as a market value? I know that's how long's a piece of string, but
That was the analogy. How long is a piece of string?
we're
You
3 or
just
4
don't
years
know.
in now, and
How
they're not
do you
really budging.
as a mortgage broker, how do you work that out?
We work it out from what the lenders give us guidance on. So if a property is coming in or being valued at 160 and it's coming down at 140, you know what the true value of that property actually is. So a client or an applicant has two choices. You either leave the property or you bridge the gap. So I'll give you a little bit of a market analysis just from my point of view as a mortgage advisor. I'm seeing maybe 2 in 10, maybe 3 in 10 properties be downvalued at the moment.
So probably they are sticking more or less
They are
now.
sticking a little bit more.
Right.
So the prices that have been put up are, I would say, are called chance prices. If you see a property up at 160 and it's not selling more or less immediately for that 160,
Yeah.
you know that
Everything's
property
gone
is not
within
worth.
the week
When
nowadays,
a
isn't it? So
property's marketed on the market, right, moves Zoopla, that sort of stuff, because it's marketed by a trusted agent, you'd assume if they market it at 150,
it's at a sellable price.
yeah, that's what I'm asking. Is a sellable
That's
price?
an assumption.
So what would be the chances of, for example, me or him getting a mortgage at that price?
Very slim, isn't it?
You-
If it's
you've
not
answered
worth
it.
that,
If a
that's it.
property is not worth 150,000, the borrowing will not reflect that.
Because usually, as you'd think, by the way, agent would only market it at a price where they think they can.
Not
sell it at.
necessarily. Not
But
necessarily.
every agent down the line's going, I can get 150 for it, and the next guy says, well, I'll get you 155. And
You're
then
working in
the
an estate
dickhead down the
agency
street, it's
market.
all the way up to 180 before it ends up getting listed. So it's tricky one sometimes.
You're working in an estate agency market with competition. There's a whole host of estate agents on the high street as well as online as well. So everybody's fighting for that business.
What factors do you take in yourself, or would the lender take in to, right, this property, this is what we're going to do to work out the actual cost of it, this is what we're going to do to work out the market value, and then make a decision based on if they can lend or if they can't lend on that asking price?
Well, they look at comparable properties on the street. So if, in your example, a property 1A has been sold in the last 6 months for 200,000, and number 15 is now being sold for 240,000. Why? Why the price differential? Now, there may be a reason for that. Number 16 may have a double-story extension or a conservatory or something that can enhance the value of that particular property.
But if it doesn't,
Under
a copy and paste, why?
There you are. So a lender is going to typically look at that.
It's only the same as what we do to value.
Yeah.
Within, same street, past 6 months, anything sold, same sort of, way around it. I suppose that's all you've got to go off as what's sold locally.
With the mortgage lender lending and social housing leases, do they count that as a security because of the strength of the lease? Does that have any benefit?
They can do. There are some lenders that do not take social leases, and there are others that will. Now, every lender has their own criteria, and that's, as a mortgage broker, I've got to decipher exactly who will take what. And if one will take it, that's when I would go to. And if one doesn't, then I don't.
I think we've come across, and I don't know if it was yourself that I asked to try and elaborate on the situation. But a landlord come to us. He bought a property. He's put a provider in there. He's got asylum seekers living in there. He's had one. So just before we were organising the structure of the lease and where he wants his break clause and things like that, one provider specified if you've got a break clause in at year 2 or year 3, it's a 2 or 3 year lease, not a 5-year lease, because you've got that break clause. And they, if the provider has the option to escape at that, then they say we assume they do. So you're only guaranteed a rental income for 2 years there. So based on that, we'll give you this. Whereas other providers will say, well, you need a break clause at year 2 or 3 in case you want your property back. So some of them are just complete opposite end of the spectrum to the other as to what they want and what sort of tenants they will allow in there.
It goes back to who's going to give the best rates, and you make a decision based on that, where you want your break clause.
Lenders look at risk. They look at risk. They look at, as you said there, with an asylum seeker inside there, will that application be accepted? Or will they be here long term? Every lender is different. Their funding, the way that they're funded is completely different. Their risk profiles are different. So Nationwide will have a different risk profile to Shawbrook. So again, as a mortgage advisor, it's my job to look at who will fit to the specific criteria that's been set.
What if in certain areas, like West Yorkshire, the rents that we're receiving from the social housing are higher than the market value rent? What effect does that have?
Again,
does it have an effect?
I don't. Yeah. I can't say yes or no because I don't know the context.
Not privy to that.
I'm not privy to the context of it, but it's a positive thing. It's a positive thing for higher rents. So I can't see it being to the detriment of obtaining a mortgage. However, that all depends on the applicant and what exactly their profile, and most typically their credit profile actually is as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we wanted to get a couple of examples off you in regards to, and again, you don't need to go into too much detail if you don't want to.
That's
only
fine.
what you're comfortable sharing, of course.
Of course.
Perhaps for a couple of your own properties.
Yeah.
Because people have the understanding that with the current interest rates, there is nothing that can be done in regards, cash flow in properties. A lot of people come to me and say, well, unless you're capital growth investing now and you're just covering the mortgage and you're waiting for appreciation in 10, 15 years' time, there's no cash flow, which I know that's not true for a start, and that's not true because I know that some of your portfolio is a cash flow portfolio as opposed to a capital growth.
It is.
So can you just break some down for us?
I think capital growth is a major buzzword within the landlord space. Everybody loves CG.
It's how people justify a bad deal.
CG, that's all I ever hear. But
it's something that you can say, but you can't be held against.
Correct.
So,
yeah, it's how people justify a deal that doesn't
say,
stack.
Just buy and...
No, it doesn't. It only returns 7%, but you've got capital growth.
Exactly.
I'm not sure about that.
I'll give you an example of one of the properties that I have bought in West Yorkshire. So I bought that property for 70,000. Okay. And deposit was 17,500. So on most buy-to-let properties, you must put down 25% deposit. And that's really for the lenders, and that's their criteria. There are some lenders that will allow you to put 20%, but again, there's other criteria to make sure that you'll be able to be accepted on that. But I'll go typically at 25%. So that would mean that your mortgage is somewhere around 52,500. So 70,000 bought, 17,500 deposit, 52,500 mortgage. Now, I would put the mortgage rate around, just for ease, I mean, I didn't get it for this, but just for ease, around 5%. So you're looking at, or 4.5%, 5%. So around £200 is your mortgage payment. And on a social lease that we've got here is around £800, would you say, on a 2-bedroom in that. So, I mean, that's
and that £200 mortgage payment, is that interest only?
That would be interest only. So you'd only be paying the interest on it. And the reason why many would argue that interest only is better is because it maximizes your cash flow. You can have a repayment mortgage, which means that you pay the balance off at the same time. However, if you're going to buy it as a repayment or a repayment mortgage, then your stress test, which would mean the amount
you have to prove
to be able to
would be much higher.
It would be your threshold would be a lot higher. So again, I have to be very careful and say that I would argue that interest only would be better for cash flow, but repayment is equally, or can be argued, much better.
If you've got a property for £70,000, assume that's the market value in that time, you get £800 a month. What's that? 9,600.
That's 9,600. You're looking at a gross yield of about 18%.
Yeah. And over 5 years.
And in West Yorkshire as well, which is...
If you're looking at it on a net level, if you take away the mortgage, around 12.5%, 13% net. So that's after the mortgage, just the mortgage has been taken off. We're not accounting for tax that you must pay. We're not accounting for any repairs or contingency or any service charges. As I said, that was a property that I bought for 70,000.
That should be minimal anyway on a social housing. Obviously, that's a should.
I would say,
you can't always guarantee it. But
just to err on the side of caution, 18% gross, around 10% net. Around 10% net. If you're taking off your tax and other little bits, which is absolutely excellent.
What's the average length for interest only? 3 years, 5 years?
It would be, you can take an interest only mortgage over 2 years or 5 years, typically.
So let's say you've got this, again, £800 a month. How would you say £200, £300 a month for the interest?
Yes, about £200.
£200, so you still got £600.
Correct.
5 years, you could potentially sell the property after 5 years, pay off the remaining, and you've made the rest in returns on your rents.
Correct.
For the short term, it's not a bad idea.
For the short term or the long term, I think there's both. It really just depends on that particular person, you as an investor or you as a landlord, what your end goal is. Is it quantity? Is it quality? Do you want to buy 30, 35 properties, or do you want to have 4 or 5 really, really fantastic
I think this is where a lot of people get stuck, is not having a plan of action as to where you want to be, and 2, not understanding what they need to do to get there. So my personal is to build up the cash flow properties that I don't necessarily ever want to own, lesser desirable areas, but something that would be, like you say yourself, a £200, £300 mortgage, £800-900 a month in rent, something to build the cash flow up. From there, once you've built that pot, you can go buy your nice houses in Harrogate and, whatever it is that you want to do for your capital growth. But I think building cash flow first is more important than...
That's a perception, Lewis. That's a perception.
That's an opinion.
It's an opinion. Yeah.
At £200, £300 a month, there's no real risk, though.
There's a risk with every property that you buy. There's a risk with every property.
In terms of the interest payments, your biggest risk is that £200, £300 a month.
True.
Which is affordable. If the worst case happens, you need to pay. It's affordable. So it
depends your pocket. It depends your pocket.
One of them is, but if you've got 10 that go tits up at the same time,
exactly,
£2,000 to £3,000 a month is a different story, I suppose.
It certainly is.
But yeah, that would be my angle of attack anyway. And I think a lot of people get stuck. you know, they're going to buy a £400,000 house, so they need the 25% deposit. So them and the wife have saved 100 grand up for the past 15 years. And then the net rent afterwards is maybe £200 a month.
I'm a big fan of spreading your liability. I would, and this is just myself and the way that my portfolio works, I would rather spend 100 grand, 100 grand, 100 grand on 3 different properties than buy one property at 300,000. But that is just me. Now, if you're looking for capital growth, for example, you could go and buy that property at 300 or 250 and not spread it. But I always look at the landlord's biggest nightmare, which is a void period.
So you got 1 property with a void, or 3 and 1 void.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it really just does depend the way you think about it.
What your risk levels are.
What's your risk level? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that starting off, if I was advising somebody to start off a property portfolio, would be to build. What we don't do enough is build. Start off with a smaller property. Know that you can manage it. So a 1-bed or a 2-bedroom property under 70 to 80,000 pounds. I know that sounds, you're not sure whether you can get that, but there are still areas that you can. Start off with that, see how you feel about it, and then increase how many properties that you want, or increase your confidence level. Because I started with just the one, and that's where I got the confidence. You're able to build after that when you know you can deal with a 1-bed or a 2-bed or a 3-bed as your first one, and then you can then buy more.
So I think something that we ask everyone that comes on is, if you could go back to being 25 years old, it sounds like you've just given the piece of advice that you would give to yourself at 25 anyway. But if you could go back to being 25 years old, knowing what you know now, what's just one piece of advice that you try and give yourself that would save you, you know, some hard learning curves?
Yeah.
Cheat code. What's the cheat code?
I would say the cheat code is treat triumph and disaster exactly the same. So embrace the good times, but brace yourself for the bad ones as well. And take out the emotion. I was far too emotive when I was buying properties to start off with, because you go into the property and you think, oh, I could put this furnishing, I could put this furnishing, I could do this to this property, I could do that to the property, I could put the most fanciest curtains inside there. Or when it's not yours, well, it is yours, but when somebody is inside there that doesn't care the way that you do, that is when
hurts.
That is when the pain is at its most. So that is the advice that I would give to a 25-year-old.
Remove your emotion.
You've got to treat it like a business. Unfortunately, you've got to treat it like a business. You've got to be a good person. You've got to be a good person, but you've got to harden yourself, because I thought that it would only be triumph, really.
So not everyone's as caring as you are.
No.
That's the bottom line.
No. And as I've got older, it's just breaking down the misconceptions of what being a social landlord actually is. I can't sit here and say that I'm a social landlord because it's not good to do so, because I'm benefiting from being one. However, you've got to always look at it from the other side as well. I think there are too many people that are very skeptical about, I would say, giving somebody an opportunity because of the general misconceptions about what social housing is. But I would always advise and urge somebody to step back and look at it. If you were in that situation, what would you do?
You'd be expecting a hand.
A hand. Yeah. Now, what I'm not saying is to go in there all guns blazing and give everybody an opportunity. No. It's got to be a calculated risk.
Yeah.
But there is no reason why your business, and I would say that your housing business, cannot be fruitful by going into this space.
Definitely. Well, we'll end it on there. Thank you very much for joining us, Paul.
No problem.
Again, Vickers Young Ltd. for your mortgages.
That's right. I'm ready and available to help.
Thank you for joining us.
Okay.